Life was supposed to be simple and straightforward. A steady job, a loving wife, and 2 wonderful kids. That's what I thought I had. My name is Jake, and I've been married to Linda for about 15 years. We live in a cozy house in the suburbs of Denver, Colorado, with our 2 daughters, Sarah and Lizzie, who are 13 and 11. I work in logistics, nothing glamorous, but it pays the bills and allows us to live comfortably. Linda used to work at a nursery when we were younger, but after we got married, she decided to stay home to take care of the kids. She was always great with them, and I thought we were a perfect team. Our house was always full of laughter, the kind that echoes through the halls and makes you feel at home. We had friends over often, and life felt good, predictable, and secure. Our home was our sanctuary. We had a big backyard where the girls loved to play, and Linda took pride in her garden. She had a green thumb and could make anything bloom. We spent our weekends together, barbecuing, going to the girls' soccer games, and just enjoying each other's company. Our neighborhood was quiet and friendly, the kind of place where everyone knows each other. It was an ideal setting for raising a family. But all that began to change a few months ago. Looking back, I can see now that there were signs, small cracks in the facade of our perfect life that I chose to ignore. Linda started acting differently, and our once happy home began to feel more like a house of secrets and lies. Little did I know, everything I thought I knew about my life was about to be turned upside down. It started innocently enough. Linda seemed distant, more preoccupied than usual. At first I chalked it up to stress. Raising 2 teenage girls was no small feat, and perhaps she was just feeling the weight of it all. But the changes in her behavior became harder to ignore. She started spending more time on her phone, often giggling at messages she wouldn't share with me. Our conversations dwindled to the bare minimum, and our intimate moments became almost non-existent. I would come home from work, ready to relax and catch up with my wife, only to find her lost in her own world. The warmth that once filled our home felt like it was seeping away. One evening, I noticed Linda dressed up more than usual. She said she was going out with some friends, but something about her demeanor didn't sit right with me. She was evasive about where she was going and who she would be with. As she left, I tried to push away the nagging doubt that gnawed at my gut. The kids started noticing the changes, too. Sarah and Lizzie would ask why Mom seemed so distracted, why she was always out of the house. I didn't have any answers for them. I didn't want to believe that anything was seriously wrong. I convinced myself that we were just going through a rough patch, that Linda would come back to me once things settled down. But then, there were the little things, the subtle clues that painted a troubling picture. Linda started wearing more makeup and perfume, even when she was supposedly just running errands. She was meticulous about her appearance in a way she hadn't been in years. She began receiving mysterious phone calls late at night, quickly ending them when I walked into the room. I remember one particular Saturday. Linda said she was going to a spa day with her friends. Normally, I'd encourage her to take some time for herself, but something about the way she avoided eye contact made me suspicious. While she was gone, I found myself pacing the house, my mind racing with possibilities. I decided to do something I'd never done before. I checked her phone. I felt a pang of guilt as I scrolled through her messages, but my need to know the truth overpowered my sense of privacy. It didn't take long to find messages from someone named Chris. The messages were flirty, filled with inside jokes and innuendos. My heart sank as I read, "Can't wait to see you tonight," and "Last night was amazing." It was like a punch to the gut. Chris wasn't just an old friend or a harmless acquaintance. He was someone Linda was clearly seeing behind my back. The ground beneath me seemed to shift as the reality of the situation began to sink in. The woman I loved, the mother of my children, was having an affair. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, trying to piece together how this could have happened. How had I missed the signs? Was it my fault for not being there enough, for not paying enough attention? Anger and betrayal coursed through me, but I knew I needed more than just a few messages to confront her. I needed hard evidence, something undeniable. So, I decided to keep quiet and gather more information. It was a painful, soul-crushing decision, but I needed to know the full extent of her betrayal. The next few weeks were torture. I acted normal, pretended everything was fine, all the while my heart was breaking inside. Linda's lies and deceit became more apparent, and my suspicions grew stronger with each passing day. I started tracking her movements, noting when she left the house and how long she was gone. I would check her phone whenever I got the chance, looking for more clues. The messages continued, each one a dagger to my heart. It became clear that Linda had been seeing Chris for months, maybe even longer. The life I thought I knew was unraveling before my eyes, and I felt powerless to stop it. One Friday evening, Linda announced she was going to visit her friend, Becky. It wasn't unusual for her to spend time with Becky, but I had a sinking feeling in my stomach. After she left, I decided to follow her. I knew it was a desperate move, but I couldn't bear the uncertainty any longer. I had to know the truth. I waited a few minutes after she left, then got into my car and drove towards Becky's neighborhood. As I approached the area, I saw Linda's car take a turn away from Becky's house. She was heading in the opposite direction, towards a part of town where Chris lived. My heart pounded in my chest as I trailed her, keeping a safe distance to avoid being spotted. Linda eventually pulled into the driveway of a small nondescript house. I parked a few blocks away and walked towards the house, staying in the shadows. The windows were dimly lit, and I could see two silhouettes moving inside. It was clear they were together, but I needed undeniable proof. I crept closer to the house, feeling like a trespasser in my own life. Through a gap in the curtains, I could see them in the living room. Linda was laughing, her head thrown back in a way I hadn't seen in years. Chris stood close to her, his hand resting on her waist. They looked so comfortable, so intimate, that it made me sick to my stomach. I pulled out my phone and started recording, capturing their laughter, their touches, and the way they looked at each other. It wasn't enough. I needed more. I moved to another window and found a better vantage point into the bedroom. What I saw next shattered any remaining hope that this could be some innocent mistake. Linda and Chris were in each other's arms, their clothes discarded carelessly on the floor. The way they touched each other, the raw passion and familiarity, was a punch to the gut. They were having sex, right there in front of my eyes, in a bed that was not mine, in a place where I had no place. The betrayal was complete and undeniable. I filmed everything, my hands shaking with rage and heartbreak. I wanted to burst in, to scream and confront them, but I knew it wouldn't help. I needed to stay calm and gather the evidence. This was my only way to hold on to some semblance of control in the chaos that had become my life. After what felt like an eternity, I stopped recording and quietly made my way back to my car. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions: anger, sadness, disbelief. I sat in my car staring at the footage on my phone, my heart breaking all over again with every replay. There was no going back now. I had the proof I needed, and it was time to confront Linda with the harsh reality of her actions. When I returned home, I felt numb. I went through the motions, tucking Sarah and Lizzie into bed, listening to their innocent chatter about their day. It was a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me, and I felt a pang of guilt for what this would mean for them. They didn't deserve this. None of us did. Linda came home late, as expected. She tried to slip into bed quietly, but I was waiting for her. I turned on the light and she jumped, her eyes wide with surprise and guilt. "Jake, what are you doing up?" she asked, trying to sound casual but failing miserably. "We need to talk," I said, my voice cold and steady. She hesitated, then sat on the edge of the bed. "About what?" I took a deep breath, my heart pounding. "About you and Chris." Her face paled, and she looked away. "Jake, I can explain." "Don't bother," I interrupted, pulling out my phone and playing the video. Her eyes widened in horror as she watched herself with Chris, the truth laid bare in front of her. "How could you do this to us, Linda?" I demanded, my voice breaking. "How could you betray me? Betray our family like this?" She was silent for a moment, then burst into tears. "I'm so sorry, Jake. I never meant for it to go this far." I shook my head, unable to believe her words. "You made a choice, Linda. You chose to lie, to cheat, to destroy everything we built together." She reached for me, but I pulled away. "Don't touch me," I said, my voice icy. "I can't even look at you right now." Linda's sobs filled the room, but they did nothing to ease the pain in my heart. The woman I loved, the mother of my children, had shattered our lives, and there was no going back. The next steps would be difficult, painful, but they were necessary. It was time to confront the reality of what she had done and decide what came next for our family. The next morning, the house was eerily quiet. The girls had already left for school, and Linda was still in the bedroom, likely dreading the confrontation she knew was coming. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I had to do. I couldn't put it off any longer. I walked into the bedroom and found Linda sitting on the edge of the bed, her eyes puffy from crying. She looked up as I entered, her face a mixture of guilt and fear. "Jake, please, let's talk about this," she began, her voice trembling. "We are going to talk, Linda," I replied, keeping my voice as calm as I could manage. "But you're going to do most of the talking. I want to hear everything. How long has this been going on? Why did you do it?" She wiped her eyes and took a shaky breath. "It started about a year ago. Chris and I reconnected on Facebook. At first it was just casual catching up, but then it became more intimate." "Intimate," I repeated, the word tasting bitter in my mouth. "You mean you started fucking him?" She flinched at my harshness but nodded. "Yes, I'm so sorry, Jake. I never meant for it to get this far." "Why, Linda? Why did you do this to us?" I asked, my voice breaking. "I was lonely," she said, her eyes filling with tears again. "You were always working, and I felt like you didn't have time for me anymore. Chris made me feel wanted, needed." "And I didn't?" I shot back, my anger flaring. "I worked hard to provide for this family, to give you and the girls a good life. Was that not enough for you?" "I know you worked hard, Jake," she said, her voice pleading. "But you were never here. I felt like I was living with a ghost." "So you decided to cheat? To betray me and destroy our family?" I shook my head, unable to comprehend her reasoning. "There were other ways to deal with this, Linda. You could have talked to me. We could have worked on it together." "I know," she whispered. "But I was weak. I made a terrible mistake, and now I'm paying for it." I stared at her, my heart aching. "This isn't just about you, Linda. This is about us, our children. What am I supposed to tell them? That their mother destroyed our family because she was lonely?" She broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. "I don't know what to do, Jake. I don't want to lose you. I love you." "Love?" I scoffed. "You call this love? What you did wasn't love, Linda. It was selfishness." She looked up at me, her eyes desperate. "Please, Jake, give me another chance. Let's go to counseling. I'll do anything to fix this." I felt a surge of conflicting emotions. Part of me wanted to throw her out, to end this nightmare and start fresh. But another part of me, the part that remembered the good times, the love we once shared, hesitated. Could we really fix this? Could I ever trust her again? "I don't know, Linda," I said finally, my voice hollow. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you for this. You've shattered my trust, and it's going to take a lot to rebuild that." She nodded, her tears flowing freely. "I understand, Jake. I'll do whatever it takes. Just please don't give up on us." I turned away, unable to look at her any longer. "I need time to think. I need space. I can't be around you right now." "Where will you go?" she asked, her voice small and frightened. "I'll stay with a friend for a few days," I said. "I need to clear my head, figure out what to do next." She nodded, her shoulders slumping in defeat. "Okay, Jake. I'll be here when you're ready to talk." I packed a bag and left the house, my heart heavy with the weight of her betrayal. As I drove away, I couldn't help but wonder if there was any way to salvage our marriage, or if it was time to let go and move on. The future felt uncertain, but one thing was clear. Nothing would ever be the same again. Driving aimlessly around Denver, I couldn't shake the anger coursing through my veins. Linda's betrayal was a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding, and the pain was morphing into something darker. Rage. I needed an outlet, something to release the storm inside me. I found myself pulling into the driveway of my best friend, Tom. He and I had been friends since college, and if anyone could help me through this, it was him. I knocked on his door, and when he opened it, he took one look at my face and knew something was terribly wrong. "Jake, what happened?" he asked, concern etched across his features. "Linda's been cheating on me," I said, my voice shaking with fury. "I found out last night. It's been going on for a year." Tom's eyes widened, and he ushered me inside. I recounted everything. The messages, the videos, the confrontation. He listened, his expression growing darker with each detail. "That bitch," he muttered. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know, Tom," I'm so angry I can barely think straight. Part of me wants to make her and that bastard Chris pay. Tom nodded slowly. Revenge can be satisfying, but it can also backfire. You have to be smart about this. What do you have in mind? We sat in his living room, and I shared my thoughts, a plan forming in my mind. It was risky and not something I would normally consider, but I was beyond reason. Linda needs to understand the pain she's caused, I said, my voice hard. I want to hit her where it hurts, her reputation, her social life, and Chris. I want him to feel the consequences too. Tom agreed to help me, though he cautioned me to be careful. Together, we devised a plan. I would gather all the evidence I had, messages, videos, everything, and make sure it found its way to the right people. First, I sent anonymous emails to Linda's closest friends, attaching some of the most damning screenshots of her messages with Chris. It was cruel, but I wanted them to see her for who she really was. Then, I created a social media account under a pseudonym and uploaded the videos. I sent the link to Chris's boss, knowing it would ruin his reputation and likely cost him his job. As I executed my plan, a part of me felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. But another part of me, the part that still loved Linda despite everything, felt a pang of guilt. This wasn't who I was, but the anger, the betrayal, it was too much to bear. The fallout was swift. Linda's friends began calling her, confronting her about the messages. I could hear her crying through the phone, trying to explain, to justify her actions. The whispers in our community grew louder, and I knew it was only a matter of time before the full extent of her betrayal was exposed. Chris didn't fare any better. His boss called him in for a meeting, and he was promptly fired. The humiliation was more than I had hoped for, and I felt a grim satisfaction knowing he was paying for his part in this mess. Linda confronted me a few days later, her eyes red and swollen from crying. "Jake, what have you done?" she demanded, her voice shaking with anger and despair. "I made sure everyone knows the truth," I said coldly. "You wanted to destroy our family? Now you get to deal with the consequences." "How could you?" she sobbed. "I know I hurt you, but this is too much." "Too much!" I shouted, my anger flaring. "You betrayed me, Linda. You lied to me, to our kids for over a year. Did you think there wouldn't be any consequences?" She broke down, falling to her knees. "I'm sorry, Jake. I'm so sorry. I'll do anything to make this right." "It's too late for that," I said, my voice steely. "The damage is done. You need to face the reality of what you've done." Linda's reputation was in tatters, and Chris was out of a job. The revenge I had sought had been achieved, but it didn't bring the satisfaction I had hoped for. Instead, it left me feeling hollow, empty. The betrayal still hurt, and the anger still burned, but now there was a layer of guilt on top of it all. As I left the house that day, I realized that revenge hadn't given me the closure I needed. It was time to think about the future, about what was best for me and the girls. Linda and Chris had paid for their actions, but now it was time for me to focus on healing and rebuilding my life. The weeks following my act of revenge were a blur of emotion. While I felt some grim satisfaction from Linda and Chris facing the consequences, the reality of our situation loomed large. I needed to think about the future, about what was best for me and the girls. It was time to take the next step, divorce. I made an appointment with a divorce lawyer, a sharp and experienced woman named Marcia Davis. Sitting in her office, I laid out the situation, showing her the evidence I had gathered. She listened carefully, taking notes and occasionally nodding. "Given the evidence you have a strong case for divorce on the grounds of adultery," Marcia said, her tone professional and reassuring. "We'll aim for joint custody of your daughters, considering you've been the primary caregiver. And given the circumstances, we can negotiate a fair division of assets." I left Marcia's office feeling a mixture of relief and dread. The process was now in motion, and there was no turning back. It was time to confront Linda with the reality of our situation. That evening, after the girls were in bed, I found Linda in the living room, staring blankly at the TV. She looked up as I entered, her eyes weary and filled with regret. "Jake," she began, her voice soft and pleading, "please, can we talk?" "We do need to talk, Linda," I said, sitting down across from her. "But not in the way you're hoping. I met with a lawyer today. I'm filing for divorce." Her face crumpled and she began to cry. "Jake, please, Don't do this. I know I've hurt you, but we can work through this. For the girls, if nothing else. I shook my head, my resolve firm. The girls deserve better than to grow up in a home filled with lies and betrayal. We can't go back to what we had. You destroyed that. Jake, I'll do anything, she begged, reaching for my hand. I'll go to counseling. I'll cut off all contact with Chris. Just give me a chance to make it right. I can't trust you anymore, Linda, I said, pulling my hand away. Every time I look at you, all I see is your betrayal. This isn't just about us. It's about our daughters. They deserve a stable, honest home, even if that means we're not together. Her sobs filled the room, and for a moment, I almost wavered. But I knew this was the right decision. There was no way to rebuild the trust she had shattered. I'm moving out tomorrow, I continued, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. I'll find a place nearby so I can be close to the girls. We'll work out a custody arrangement that's best for them. Linda nodded, tears streaming down her face. I understand, she whispered. I'll do whatever it takes to make this as easy as possible for them. The next day, I packed my things and moved into a small apartment a few miles away. It wasn't much, but it was a fresh start. I spent the next few days setting up the apartment, making it feel like home. I wanted it to be a place where the girls felt comfortable and safe when they were with me. The legal process was grueling, but Marcia was a fierce advocate. We worked out a custody arrangement that gave me significant time with Sarah and Lizzie, and the division of assets was fair. Linda didn't fight me on any of it, perhaps realizing that she was in no position to demand anything. The first night the girls stayed with me was bittersweet. They were confused and sad about the changes, and I did my best to reassure them that both their parents loved them, and that everything would be okay. We spent the evening playing games and watching movies, trying to create new memories in this new chapter of our lives. One night, about a month after I moved out, Linda called. She sounded broken, her voice barely a whisper. Jake, can we meet? I need to talk to you. Reluctantly, I agreed. We met at a nearby coffee shop, the atmosphere heavy with unspoken words. Linda looked worn out, her eyes hollow and filled with regret. Jake, she began, I know I've hurt you more than I can ever make up for. I've lost everything, my friends, my reputation, and most importantly, you and the girls. I just want you to know that I'm truly sorry. I appreciate that, Linda, I said, my voice calm. But sorry doesn't change what happened. We need to move forward for the sake of the girls. She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. I know. I just wanted to say it, to acknowledge how much I've destroyed. I hope you find a way to rebuild your life, Linda, I said, feeling a pang of sympathy despite everything. But we're done. It's time for both of us to move on. We parted ways, and as I walked back to my car, I felt a strange sense of closure. The chapter with Linda was closing, and while the pain was still there, it was starting to fade. I had taken control of my life again, and the future, while uncertain, held the promise of healing and new beginnings. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. Slowly but surely, the pain of Linda's betrayal began to fade. Life was different now, a new normal that I was learning to navigate. It was far from easy, but every day felt like a step towards healing and rebuilding. My apartment, once a stark reminder of my shattered life, began to feel like home. Sarah and Lizzie adjusted to the new arrangement better than I had hoped. They were resilient, finding joy in the little things, and adapting to the changes with a strength that amazed me. Our time together was precious, filled with laughter, activities, and heartfelt conversations. Linda and I maintained a civil relationship for the sake of the girls. We communicated about their schedules, school events, and other important matters, but kept our interactions brief and to the point. It was clear that she was struggling, but I couldn't allow myself to be drawn back into her turmoil. I had my own path to walk, and so did she. One bright Saturday morning, I decided to take the girls on a hike. It was something we used to do as a family, and I wanted to recreate those happy memories, even if things were different now. We packed some snacks, grabbed our water bottles, and headed to a nearby trail. The hike was invigorating. The fresh air, the sound of birds, and the rustle of leaves underfoot were a welcome escape from the emotional heaviness that had been my constant companion. Sarah and Lizzie ran ahead, their laughter echoing through the trees. Watching them, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for months. Dad, look at this! Lizzie called, holding up a colorful leaf. Isn't it pretty? It's beautiful, sweetheart, I said, smiling. Just like you two. We continued our hike, and for the first time in a long while, I felt genuinely happy. The burden of betrayal and anger was lifting, replaced by hope and a renewed sense of purpose. As the months passed, I threw myself into my work and hobbies. I reconnected with old friends, joined a local gym, and even took up photography, a passion I had long neglected. These activities kept me busy and helped me rediscover parts of myself that had been buried under the weight of my marriage. One evening, while attending a gallery opening with Tom, I met someone. Her name was Emily, and she was an art teacher with a warm smile and a kind heart. We started talking, and there was an instant connection. She was understanding, patient, and genuinely interested in getting to know me without any pressure or expectations. Our first few dates were simple but meaningful. We talked about our lives, our pasts, and our hopes for the future. Emily knew about my recent divorce, and she was supportive without being intrusive. She had a calming presence that made me feel at ease, something I hadn't felt in a long time. As our relationship grew, I introduced Emily to Sarah and Lizzie. They took to her immediately, and seeing them together filled me with a joy I hadn't expected. Emily wasn't trying to replace Linda. She was simply adding to the love and support that my daughters and I needed. One weekend, we all went to the park together. Emily and the girls played frisbee, while I watched from a nearby bench, my heart swelling with gratitude. This new chapter of my life was beginning to take shape, and it was filled with promise and happiness. Linda, on the other hand, was still struggling to find her footing. She continued to see the girls regularly, but our interactions remained strained and distant. I knew she regretted her actions, but I couldn't let her regret pull me back into the past. My focus was on the future, on building a life that was true to who I was and what I wanted. One day Linda called me, her voice hesitant. "Jake, can we meet? There's something I need to discuss." I agreed, meeting her at a coffee shop not far from where we used to live. She looked tired, worn down by the consequences of her choices. But there was a determination in her eyes that I hadn't seen before. "Jake, I want to apologize again," she began, her voice steady. "I've been seeing a therapist, and I'm working on myself. I know I hurt you deeply, and I understand if you can never forgive me. But I want to make amends, if not for us, then for the girls." "I appreciate that, Linda," I said, genuinely touched by her sincerity. "But forgiveness isn't something that happens overnight. It's a process, and it will take time." "I know," she replied, nodding. "I just wanted you to know that I'm trying to be a better person, for them and for myself." We talked for a while longer, discussing the girls and their future. It was a difficult conversation, but it was necessary. We needed to find a way to co-parent effectively, to ensure that our daughters felt loved and supported by both of us. As I walked away from that meeting, I felt a sense of closure. Linda and I were on separate paths now, but we shared a common goal, the well-being of our children, and that was something worth working towards. Emily and I continued to grow closer, and as the years went by, our relationship deepened. She became an integral part of my life and my daughters' lives. We faced challenges together, celebrated milestones, and built a future that was grounded in trust and love. Reflecting on everything that had happened, I realized that Linda's betrayal, painful as it was, had led me to a place of growth and self-discovery. It had forced me to reevaluate my life, my values, and my relationships. I had learned to value myself, to recognize my worth, and to never settle for less than I deserved. Life after Linda was different, but it was also richer, fuller, and more authentic. I had found happiness again, not just in my relationship with Emily, but in the simple joys of everyday life. I had built a new life from the ashes of my old one, and I was proud of the person I had become. To anyone going through a similar experience, know that there is hope. It may be hard, and it may take time, but you deserve to be happy. Don't settle for a life filled with deceit and pain. There's a brighter future waiting, one where you can find peace, love, and fulfillment. Thank you for reading my story. Here's to new beginnings and the journey ahead.